Hi everyone, and it's great that you're part of this initiative as part of the Built Environment Exchange. Wearing the t-shirt myself. Um, I'm sure that you'll get a lot of value from the experience working with Sweco, Synergy, ourselves, City of Glasgow College, in response to the challenge at B. Craig's. What I want to give you is a bit of strategic context of offsite construction and the bio offsite manufacture of the built environment using natural materials in the context of Scotland, where I run a research centre on offsite construction and innovative structures. What we do as a research centre, just for a bit of context, is we lead on fundamental and applied research for industry, government and public sector bodies in the thematic area of industrialised building systems. And we do this by undertaking core research activity, applying it into the sector in order to create impact, and we do this through external engagement, and we underpin that process through student talent via the Built Environment Exchange, providing students with experience with industry via innovation internships, master scholarship and employability on our live research projects, ideally accelerating their careers and indeed importantly accelerating cultural change within the sector. We don't work in isolation. In fact, we work in collaboration locally in many respects. For example, with the Centre for Wood Science and Technology at Edinburgh Napier, they understand the forest resource and silvicultural practices, forest practices which can affect that resource in order that the sawmillers can maximise the utilisation of that forest resource with regards to adding value to it by means of creating dimensional lumber for structural purposes, and indeed for those structural lumber components or timber components to be further enhanced through re-engineering or through off-site pre-manufacture. So we can't do our work with the industry unless we understand the resource, hence why we partner with the likes of Centre for Wood Science and Technology. Of course, that's not restricted to that centre alone. There's other centres at Edinburgh Napier University and indeed across Scotland and indeed internationally. So this is all about collaboration locally and internationally, etc. So in that regard, what we do essentially generates outputs, working with the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, and we have the opportunity to interface with the Innovation Factory there and also their funding support mechanisms and the wider construction network that they're engaged with. The work that we do cuts across the range of off-site construction products and systems, from panelised and low levels of enhancement, that's like open panel construction, timber frame, all the way to fully enhanced panelised systems with windows and doors pre-installed. Mechanical and electrical services can also be pre-installed, as can the external facades and indeed the internal linings. And of course that can move forward into modular or volumetric construction, which can also include things like bathroom pods, where the sanitary ware is also included. Bringing these systems together can create hybrid forms, or indeed bringing timber technologies, concrete technologies and steel technologies together can also create hybrid forms and systems. So we also think about it in terms of the hybrid nature of what can be delivered through standardised products, creating mass customised solutions. And in the mix of all of that, there's of course sub-assemblies of the component parts, such as I-joists or trusses. So these sub-assembly components and parts which can be standardised and also brought into that sort of product family architecture for utilisation. So we've worked across the spectrum of that, and those products and systems that we've worked with industry to evolve have been utilised in live projects such as the Commonwealth Games Athletes Village, which has mass timber walls, for example, and closed panel timber solutions. The Dyson Institute of Engineering and Technology, which our Beck scholars were able to get involved with. And I spoke about international. Well, as an example of that, the American Hardwood Export Council demonstration project which is exhibited at the V&A called Multiply, using tulip wood for CLT production. And we look to digitise all of this, and we have a Trimble Technology Lab at Edinburgh Napier University in that respect. And of course this content is published, mass timber as an example, and also offset industrialised timber construction. So why I think this is incredibly important is I think actually in Scotland we have a real opportunity with respect to our renewable and natural capital. Of course, largely on the premise of our available timber resource. So how we can utilise that forest and renewable resource, and indeed the human capital that exists, the skills and knowledge. Obviously that's something through the Offsite Ready project, for example, that we're trying to affect more. Then we have the international expertise which reside in Scottish context, both in terms of the academic, industry and stakeholders, and indeed the technical capabilities which are spoke to in terms of the processing, value add and off-site manufacture. So how can we harness all of that to make substantial change? So we have a forest resource. It's worth a substantial amount to the economy, not just in terms of the dimensional lumber which is produced for the likes of structural applications, but also in terms of what it can do for things such as recreational purposes. So it means a lot to the Scottish economy at scale. So it's thinking about it on those types of level, but indeed how you can maximise the use of that renewable resource for the delivery of the built environment. In terms of international expertise, well, we at Edinburgh Napier like to consider ourselves globally renowned for the work that we undertake in off-site and industrialised forms of construction. And there's also the Innovation Centre, there's Scottish Forestry, the amalgamation of off-site organisations in the form of Offsite Solutions Scotland, which cover the length and breadth of Scotland geographically, strategic integrated into research and CERT and the work that's undertaken with the sawmillers. So if you look to harness all of that, we have a lot of knowledge and expertise which resides within the Scottish context. And that's borne out through things like the Innovation Factory and their off-site lines, the opportunity there to make mass timber components using the vacuum press. At Edinburgh Napier we have testing facilities where these products and systems can be looked at from a structural, thermal, acoustic perspective to look at their credentials for utilisation within the built environment. I spoke about the Trimble Technology Lab that lets us capture this information in a digital form and move it towards building information modelling and ultimately digital twins, where there's a feedback loop into the digital model to validate and verify what's been produced through that digitisation process. And of course we have the inherent capital that's been invested in terms of off-site and pre-manufacture. Skills and expertise, Offsite Ready is certainly part of that and has now launched. The work that we've undertaken with the Built Environment Exchange, having our graduates and undergraduates be able to engage directly with industry, and very much that's the premise for this project indeed. So this is all about how do we accelerate the careers of people from giving them a broader understanding but also engaging them directly with industry. So we hope to make a real change in that respect. And as I spoke to as well, there's a whole series of built assets out there, not just in the residential sector, but the case studies we see in front of us are, and those go from the likes of Dunsmore House, from Macar Construction, the top left, of the projects delivered by CCG, such as the tallest timber building in Scotland, top right in Yoker. I spoke about the Dyson project, which was delivered by Carbon Dynamic, and again the Commonwealth Athletes Village is a really good demonstration of what can be done through public and private partnership and collaboration and cooperation for the delivery of the built environment. So there's numerous case studies out there which exemplify this, and this all aligns with the premise of the circular economy. How can you take renewable resource and maximise its value in order that you don't waste it and return it to the atmosphere in the form of carbon, by putting it to landfill. So before we burn it and use it for biomass, how do we maximise its utilisation within the built environment, and think of that with respect to design for manufacturing, assembly and indeed disassembly. So when that built system needs to have a change of use or be dismantled and the product's repurposed, we've thought about that at the start, such that can take place, and we can always maximise the use of the resource and correspondingly the value that it has, in order that we don't release carbon back into the atmosphere. So other things to think about, of course, are that digital piece, thinking about digitisation and digital twin, how these digital models can harness the global warming potential, the environmental credentials of the product, the cost information, the productivity, the waste, the logistical information from a project management perspective. How can you build as much into the digital model as possible, such that when you utilise that digital model and change aspects of your design, it informs that decision making process in real time. and ideally you create that digital model in a manner which, when the project goes live, you can track that information from forest floor to built asset and during its useful life, and enrich it. And during that process, you can use digitization even for things like virtual reality, augmented reality, and indeed explain to the workers where they need to install the services or apply tape for coal bridging, or look to implement the right standard details. So there's a whole myriad of opportunities within the digitisation process. And there's good examples to even think about in terms of open source formatting. If you look up WikiHouse, you'll see information in that regard. So there's a lot you can do with digitisation, which I'm sure you're fully aware, and I'd like you to harness that indeed through this project. So I think this project, working with B. Craig's, there's an opportunity to think of that in a larger scale and what can be done in a Scottish context, harnessing that renewable resource, those technical expertise in the digitisation process, in order that we can accelerate change in the delivery of the built environment by exemplifying it within this particular case study. And it's critically important, given the challenges around productivity. Construction has stagnated. There's a necessity to do more, but in doing more, we don't want to impinge upon the environment by using more non-renewable resources and using up our carbon budget and going over that tipping point in terms of accelerating environmental damage and change. So fundamentally, we have to think about that in many respects. So there's a real opportunity for strategic convergence in the Scottish context, thinking about those key stakeholders: Innovation Centre, Scottish Enterprise, Napier, Scottish Forestry, Highlands and Highlands Enterprise, etc. The forest products, the sawmillers, and the large groups such as BSW, and the products that they produce, including the engineered systems via the likes of James Jones. There's the further added value through organisations such as Glenalmond Timber, Donaldson's Timber Engineering, the largest truss supplier in the UK, OCO, Norboard, who produce oriented strand board, and indeed Russwood, who produce cladding systems. ITW are based in Glenrothes, and they produce the metalwork and the connectors for these systems. And of course, these are all utilised for offsite and prefabrication by the likes of Offsite Solutions Scotland and their membership, and the wider offsite construction sector in Scotland, which is understood fully through a Scottish Government report which Edinburgh Napier contributed to, which demonstrates the value of that sector in terms of output: 300 million, 75% of which is offsite manufacturers, a large degree of which is panelised. And that's, there's a real opportunity in terms of delivering affordable housing solutions in the Scottish context, but indeed across the wider UK, and how you can facilitate the utilisation of homegrown timber products within that process in order to enhance and maximise its use in the built environment. So a new model is certainly something we want to look towards for jobs and wealth creation, to instigate startups and reappropriate skills, secure long-term success for currently established organisations. But there's opportunities to look to what's happening internationally. In Norway, Mjøstronet, the tallest timber building that's been built, fully timber system, externally timber cladding, no challenges around fire with that one as a result of the approach that they've taken. So real great international case studies we can look at and learn from, and draw upon some of that indeed for the smaller scale examples that we're looking at through the basis of this project. And obviously, coming out of where we're at, thinking about this in terms of the challenges around the COVID crisis, health and well-being aspects, both in terms of how we live within these buildings, but what this also means for things like social distancing and how you can use off-site approaches to maximise the health and well-being of the operatives. So, thank you for listening. Well, let's make this new normal as we come out of this a sustainable future. So I very much look forward to seeing what you produce through your work. Thank you very much for your time.